Welcome into another episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I am Will Thomas, and today I wanted to go through each SEC team. All 16, we're going alphabetically through them, and I wanted to predict if they're going to be better or worse than last season. Now, you can really look at that a few ways, right? Because a team could be better than they were last season and have a worse record, or even vice versa, right? You could be losing some key pieces, your roster isn't quite as talented, but you could even be set up better for success. So we'll dive into all that for each team. There's a few where there's a very good argument that they are better, but they'll perform worse. But we'll just get straight into it right now, starting off with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, Bama, I do believe, is going to be overall better, and their offense just has to take a step forward outside of quarterback, right? Because you're bringing in a new quarterback, which is a question. But every part around that should improve. The running game and the offensive line just simply have to be better than they were last season. That's just how bad they were last year. And as a consequence of that, right, the receivers, they weren't very consistent. They had a lot of drops. I believe all that will be better. Bama's secondary could be one of the best in the country in terms of just, the star potential at every single position. You pulled in some really good talent in the front seven, all at the edge, D-tackle, and linebacker, a bunch of good guys coming in. I think that Bama's team is going to be better than they were last season, just, skill-wise, roster-wise. I don't know if I'm willing to say that they necessarily have a better record, though. Right, because they won 10 games in the regular season last year. They won a playoff game. That's a really good result. And just with how much, you have a new quarterback, this is a pretty pressure-packed year for DeBoer and Bama, I do think, as if, any year isn't. So I'm not sure I'm going to necessarily take a giant leap and say that Bama wins, a 12-game overall this year. But their roster, I do believe, is pound for pound better than it was last season. Moving to the Arkansas Razorbacks now. This is really one of the first teams where it's really just how do you define better or worse. I think they're going to be a much more rounded team than they were last season. Right, last year's Arkansas offense, that offense was elite. Taylor Green, Mike Washington's receivers, they were putting up so many yards and so many points per game. Their defense couldn't stop anything. Couldn't stop anything. They only won 2 games last season. So I think that in Silverfield's first year here, their roster is going to be just more spread out. I think the offense will come back down to earth. I think the defense will elevate a little bit. So the roster is going to be just much more well-rounded. And I think they'll win more than 2 games, right? I'm definitely on the train of Arkansas will be able to get that, that elusive third win this season. So give me Arkansas to be better in the sense of, their record's going to be better. But the roster, I'm not sure it takes a big jump, but I believe it gets more spread out, so it's more of a football team, right? As opposed to an offense that just has to go win shootouts every single week. Moving to the Auburn Tigers into their first-year head coach here, I think Auburn will be better because I think that offense is going to take a big-time step, right? I think it'll be much more consistent because you have Alex Golesh running, familiarity with his players. Jackson Arnold isn't there anymore. Just all big wins. So the offense should be better. And defensively, there's plenty of continuity. Right, because DJ Durkin does come back as DC. The defense retained way more players than the offense did. Their win-loss could actually be the same, though, because their schedule is very hard. It's a really tough schedule. I do actually have Auburn going 5-7 in my preseason prediction. I think the roster will be better, but the record could be the same. Maybe just like 1 game better or 2 at 6-6 or something like that. But the team overall for Auburn, I believe, will be better. And even if that record is the same or is barely a step forward from last year, I think just watching Auburn football this year, you'll see, okay, this is better than it was last year. The win-loss is what it is, but there's definitely a sign of progress this year under Golesh. So that's where I think Auburn will be this fall. Moving to the Florida Gators. I think Florida is also going to be better. The roster's pretty similar, right? Because they returned tons of their best talent from last season. Jaden Ball, Dallas Wilson on offense, guys like Jaden Woods, Miles Graham on defense. So the roster's actually very, very similar, right? So I don't even know if it's because of that, but no more Billy Napier, which is a massive win for any program. How does the quarterback work out? It's probably going to be Aaron Philo. How does he play? Is that offensive line able to be solid? That's their biggest question. And defensively, there aren't that many question marks, but the interior of that D-line doesn't have a lot of proven names. So there are still some holes on this Florida roster. I say better just because I think they'll be able to pass 4 wins. Right, the roster talent is very similar. I don't think that the roster is, marketably better than last year's. I think it's very similar. Still very dangerous. They should be able to make a bowl game this year. If not, beating that 4-win mark should be very doable for John Summerall. So I'm better on the Florida Gators. Going to the Georgia Bulldogs here, this is my first worse. But I just need to stress it enough. I'm not sure I can't stress it enough. Saying that Georgia is going to be worse does not mean that they're not still going to be elite. They could still be one of the top 2 teams in the SEC and be worse than they were last year. But here's why I'm there. Receiver is such a massive question for me on this Georgia roster. right? They've kind of been lacking that dynamic, downfield, explosive playmaking ability overall in the past. And now you lose Zachariah Branch. You no longer have guys, Dylan Bell, Colby Young, those kind of names in that room. So the running game should be awesome for Georgia, and I trust Gunnar Stockton. But if you don't have any real downfield threat, defenses can just play really close to the line and smother what should be a very elite running attack. Defensively for Georgia, I think they'll be more than talented once again. Plenty of returners. It's a Kirby Smart coach team. But looking at their schedule and just how the roster, not just of Georgia, but the rosters of their opponents play out, 2 or 3 regular season losses wouldn't shock me. So I think this could be a year where Georgia's a really good team. They just, they have 1 or 2 extra losses in the regular season. Maybe they don't win the SEC for the first time since 2009 this season. So I think Georgia will be very good still, but maybe a bit of a step back, both on paper and with the records when that win-loss this fall. Moving to Kentucky. I think Kentucky will be better this year. I'm very excited about what Will Stein is doing. And that offense, Kenny Minchey at quarterback, CJ Baxter at running back, a good bit of new faces at receiver. It's so much new, and that can go one of 2 ways. Right, it's either where it doesn't work out, right, because these guys they're not used to playing with each other enough when they hit adversity, when they get punched in the face, what do? I think there's enough firepower, and I trust Will Stein's brain to say that this Kentucky offense, at least early on in the season, will be catching people by surprise and will look really, really sharp. So I think that Kentucky has the chance to, definitely make a bowl game this year, win a lot more games. Defensively, they do need some guys to step up who haven't done it before. Right, there's a few more questions for me on defense than there are on offense, but I think that even if their win-loss is the same, kind of same thing as Auburn, right? I think that even if they don't win more games, you will just see this is a better, product of football than we had last season. So I think that for both Auburn and now for Kentucky here, obviously under first-year head coaches, even if the win-loss is the same, maybe even a game worse, you'll just see better football being played. Moving to the LSU Tigers here. Lane Kiffin, his first year, I think it's just better. I mean, this is one of the craziest rosters in the country, pound for pound, one of the most talented in the nation. Beating 7 wins with that 2 deep should be very easy to do. I'm not there though with LSU with jumping to playoff contention, SEC title contention. I'm not quite there. And part of my concerns for that is depth in the secondary. You have some injuries. DJ Pickett, PJ Woodland, really good players. Behind those two, it's a lot of I have to see it happen first. Sam Levin, I'm a little bit worried about how he transfers to the SEC. Can he stay healthy? So I'm not there with LSU in terms of the playoff. I've said that before. But I do believe that they will be better than they were last year. Right? They should be able to eclipse 7 wins without a real problem. And it will obviously be a more exciting, more consistent brand of football that, the Tigers are used to seeing being played there. Now to Mississippi State. This one is so close to me. I almost just want to say the same. Right, because they went 5-8 last season. But if you break that down, they had 1-score losses to Texas, Tennessee, and Florida. So you can make the argument that they were just 3, 4, or 5 plays away from winning 8 games last year. But they were really close. They were much closer to being a legitimate team in the SEC than it looked like last season. But now looking forward to their roster this fall, I have questions on their defense outside of their secondary. Right, in that front 7, Will Whitson comes back after an injury from last season. Can he step up and be that elite playmaker that he was before the injury? I think that their offense could kind of be like Arkansas's this year, where it's really explosive, but it kind of they're not really helped out by their defense. They have to keep winning in shootouts. I think they're going to be right around the same win-loss. Maybe a slightly worse overall team just because, Kamaro Taylor, his first year as the starter, can he really make that jump immediately, or will it kind of be fast on him? It'll be close, but Mississippi State was the most razor-thin margins for me. I think it'll be very similar, mainly because of just diving into their season last year. They weren't even as bad as it seemed like they were. So for State, I'm pretty close. And moving on to Missouri, this one more really close margins here, but I'm going to be slightly better on Missouri. Massive offensive upgrades, right? They bring in Austin Simmons to be there for Bo Beulah now instead of quarterback. Tons of new receivers. The running back room is obviously elite. Hopefully Ahmad Hardy is right. My biggest question is coming off the edge for Missouri. They lose Damon Wilson to the portal. He's at Miami now. And they lose Zion Young to the pros. Where does that edge production now come from? Because last year, their defense could just rely on those 2 guys to go wreak havoc every single snap. You don't have that now. So that's my biggest question for them on defense. But they won 8 games last season. I think they can maybe go get 9 this fall. So I'll lean a little bit better because to me, the upgrades on offense outweigh my concerns on defense. So I'll say Missouri is slightly better than they were last season. The Oklahoma Sooners now, I'm going to go better. Because I'm assuming they would get John Mateer fully healthy for all 12 games, right? No more surgery on his throwing hand, hopefully. They portaled in really solid receivers to help replace Deion Burks and they'll complement Isaiah Satania, and their defensive returns are really good better their stars. But I don't know, just looking at their schedule, I don't know if I can get to 10 wins. Just looking at it that way, it is a really tough slate of games. So I think that Oklahoma could be a better team, but with a worse record. 9-3, 8-4 wouldn't shock me for Oklahoma, if they have that record. But after the year, we look back and like that was a really good team. They just lost some really close games to some really quality opponents. I think that's where we could be at with Oklahoma this fall. So I'll say the Sooners are a better team, but maybe with a worse record, maybe missing out on the playoff this year. Next up are the Ole Miss Rebels, and this is another one that I've kind of gotten flack for. I think that they're going to be worse, mainly on offense. That does not mean that they can't still be an elite team and be a playoff team, right? Their offense being worse than last year is a relative term to what was an amazing offense, right? And why I think it might be worse is just because you're losing Lane Kiffin, you're losing Weiss as the OC. It's just, new staff. Pete Golding, now the head man, is more of a defensive guy. Schematically, I just wonder if it slows down a little bit. But defensively, they should take a leap, right? With Golding now, instead of Kiffin as the head man, defense will be prioritized a little bit more. Pete Golding in his first year as a full-time head coach, I just wonder about it, right? Because we haven't seen it yet. I think that they're going to be a little bit worse than last year overall, but still very good. This is still a team that can make the playoff, and I wouldn't blink. But I do believe the Rebels will pound for pound be a little bit worse than they were last season. Moving to the South Carolina Gamecocks. This one I'm pretty confident on. I think it'll be better. I think this is a much better roster than last year. They pulled in much more offensive depth, mainly at receiver. I don't really know much about those running backs, but if Lenore Sellers can take a decent brunt of the rushing yards, then those backs just to be kind of, okay, and just sort of soak up carries so Sellers doesn't get hit very often. Defensively, Dylan Stewart now has Caleb Herring across from him at the other edge spot. That should be a very good duo. Right, so 2 years ago, they won 9 games with the same core. Last year, they only won 4. I think you just kind of regress to the middle here. 6 or 7 wins for Carolina will make sense to me. I think it's a better roster and will be a better record for the Gamecocks this fall. Final 4 teams here. The Tennessee Vols are next up. I think they're going to be a little bit worse. But that is because I think they're just kind of setting up for next season. Looking at Tennessee's roster, just the pieces that are young, Jim Knowles' first year as DC, I think this is the year before the year for the Vols. They have elite wide receivers. I do like Bishop at running back a lot. You have a new quarterback coming in who is very young. That's how they're going to be George McIntyre, who's a redshirt freshman, or Faison Brandon, who is a true freshman. Jim Knowles, like I said, first year as the DC. The book on him is it takes a little bit for him to really establish his game plan at a school, but it's really good once he does. They lost Chaz Coleman, right, after portaling him in. He's no longer with the team. That is a big hit to that pass rush. I think it'll be a little worse, but you'll see flashes. I think they can get some decent wins where you'll be very clear why you should believe in Tennessee for 2027, but just in 26, I think they might take a bit of a step back. Moving to Texas Longhorns here. If you've heard me talk about Texas this year, this is not a surprise to you. I think they're going to be better. This is Arch's now second year as a true starter. I believe you'll see him really take that step, hopefully be healthier this year. You have a stupid running back duo, elite wide receiver depth, and superstars on defense at every single level. They better be better this year, right? Or conversations are going to be had just about what Sarkisian can actually do at Texas, the future Longhorns program, right? Where's all this money going? Right, what is the investment for if Texas really can't take that step? So I think Texas is going to be better than last year. Right, I think more than 9 wins is very much on the table. I think they make the playoff. I think they make it to Atlanta. I think this is a big-time year for Texas. So give me better for the Longhorns. And the Longhorns' rival in-state, the Texas A&M Aggies, I think they're going to be a little bit worse. I think Marcel Reed takes a step forward. I believe he's much more consistent as a passer, and he gives people a reason to believe in him, in the future. I do like their wideouts a lot. A lot of my questions come on defense. Can Anto Saka really replace Cassius Howell? Both in terms of production, but also just being a leader on that defense. Sanford's health at linebacker, right? He had that bad injury in the spring game. Is he back early on? When he is back, is he 100%? I just don't see another 11-win season for the Aggies this year. And part of that's because of their schedule. So I think the team, it could be just as good overall for A&M, but I think they'll have a worse record just because of how good last season really was. I don't know if they can replicate that again this year. And the final team here, the Vanderbilt Commodores. This was unfortunately a pretty easy worse, right? No Diego Pavia, no Eli Stowers, no Trey Richardson on that offense. You're bringing in a new quarterback, likely in Jared Curtis, who was the top quarterback in his class, but he's a true freshman in an offense that's losing a ton of elite pass catchers. You do have some key pieces on defense, but 10 wins again would just blow me away. Right, it's kind of a post-Pavia reset for Vanderbilt, for Clark Lee. I think that I have Vandy kind of struggling to make a bowl game this year, in all honesty. I think Vandy takes a bit of a step back, but that does not mean that Vanderbilt is back to what Vandy used to be. I just think this is just kind of the ebbs and flows of college football at this point. Right, you have such a great year with a program-changing quarterback, a bit of a down year here, but Vandy will still be very relevant in the SEC for years to come. So that'll do it. Those are all 16 SEC teams, and whether or not I think they'll be better or worse this year, I'm sure that I'll go. I'm sure I'm totally right. Right, none of these are going to be wrong. But thank you so much for watching this episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. If you have been enjoying my college football content, my SEC stuff, subscribe to me here and follow me on Twitter. I'm doing this every single day until we kick off in August, and then once the season begins, just so much content coming at you guys all the time because this is the best sport on the planet. So thank you so much for watching this episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I've been Will Thomas, and I will see you next time.